I thought my promotion would be the best day of my life. I was wrong. It was the day I found out exactly what my family thought I was worth. My manager called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and when he slid the offer letter across the desk, senior software engineer, $62,000 more per year, relocation package to the Seattle office. I had to press my lips together to keep from crying. Not sad crying, the other kind, the kind that sneaks up on you when something you've worked toward for 4 years finally lands in your hands and feels real and solid and yours. I texted my husband before I even got back to my desk. He called me immediately, and I could hear him grinning through the phone. "I knew it," he said. "I knew it before you did." I laughed, and it felt light, clean, like the beginning of something. I waited until that evening to call my parents. I wanted to do it right. Sitting on our couch with a glass of wine, relaxed, giving them the kind of news that deserved to be savored. My mother picked up on the second ring. "Seattle," she said when I finished telling her. There was a pause that went on a beat too long. "That's so far. It's a 4-hour flight, Mom." "And your father, you know how his back has been. We can't just fly somewhere." I reminded myself to breathe. "You won't have to fly anywhere. We'll come back to visit. And you can come see us once we're settled." She said, in the way that means she has already decided something and is just waiting for the conversation to be over. My father got on the line. He asked about the salary, and I told him, and there was a silence I couldn't read. "You're going to need a bigger emergency fund," he said finally. "Cost of living out there is brutal." That was the whole conversation. No congratulations. No, you deserve this. No, we're proud of you. I told myself it was fine. They weren't expressive people. I'd known that my whole life. I went to bed that night, still feeling good, still holding the offer letter in my mind, like something precious. Within a week, everything changed. My younger brother, the one who had been living with my parents since he dropped out of his second college program 2 years ago, started calling me every other day, not to catch up, to remind me of things. How hard things had been for the family since my dad's hours got cut. How my mom's prescriptions were getting expensive. How he'd been trying to find work but the market was rough, and he just needed a little more time. I had been sending money home since I was 24, every month, without fail, $600. It had started as something temporary, just to help while my dad recovered from a minor surgery, and then it became just the way things were. I never stopped. I never asked for it back. I barely talked about it, because talking about it made me feel like I was asking for gratitude, and I didn't want gratitude. I just wanted them to be okay. But now my brother was calling, and not quite asking, just circling. And my mother started texting me articles about the housing crisis in Seattle. And my father, who never sent emails, sent me an email with a subject line that said "thinking about your future," and a body that was 3 paragraphs about how unstable tech jobs were and how he'd read that layoffs were happening everywhere. I read that email 3 times. I replied carefully. I said I understood his concern and that I'd done my research and felt confident in the move. He did not write back. 2 weeks before my last day at my current job, my mother called me on a Saturday morning. She sounded tired, the specific kind of tired she deployed when she needed me to feel guilty before she'd even said anything yet. "Your brother had an interview," she said. "He didn't get it. I'm sorry to hear that. He's really struggling. I know. You know, with you moving away." She stopped, started again. "It's going to be hard. On all of us. Your father and I aren't getting younger. Your brother needs stability. It would mean a lot if you could. I don't know. Think about whether this is the right time." I was standing in my kitchen. I had my coffee in my hand. I set it down very carefully on the counter. "Mom, are you asking me not to take the promotion?" "I'm asking you to think about your family." "I am my family," I said. "My husband is my family." She made it sound like she'd bitten into something sour. That's a very cold thing to say. The call ended shortly after that. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, looking at nothing. My husband found me there. He didn't say anything right away, just stood close, and I leaned into him and told him everything. He listened the way he always does, fully, without interrupting, and then he said, quietly, "You already knew this was coming." He was right. I had known. I just hadn't wanted to say it out loud, because saying it out loud made it true. We moved to Seattle on a Friday in April. We rented a truck, loaded it ourselves, drove 16 hours over 2 days with our cat, complaining the entire way from her carrier in the back seat. My husband drove most of it. I sat in the passenger seat with my feet on the dashboard and watched the landscape change, and somewhere around the Oregon border, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Room. Like there was finally room to breathe. Our new apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. The first morning, I made coffee and stood at those windows in my pajamas and watched the clouds move over the water and thought, I built this. We built this. This is ours. I sent my mother a photo. She replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. I started work the following Monday. It was overwhelming and exciting, and hard in the best way. The kind of hard that makes you sharper. My new team was smart and kind and demanding, and I loved every minute of it. My brother called that first week. He needed $400 for something he described as a situation with his car registration. I sent it. I adjusted my monthly transfer upward by $50 because I felt guilty about moving, and I thought maybe guilt was something I could pay off. It wasn't. 3 months in, my mother called to tell me she'd seen a specialist about her knee, and the out-of-pocket cost was more than she'd expected. Could I help with that? I helped with that. A month after that, my father called, which was rare enough that my stomach dropped when I saw his name on my phone, to tell me they needed a new water heater. The old one had gone out. Could I? Yes, I could. I started to notice something. The calls always came at inconvenient times. Saturday mornings. Late Sunday evenings. Never during the week, when they might catch me at work and I might be distracted or rushed. Always during the pockets of time I had carved out for myself and my husband. Always precisely when I was starting to feel okay. I mentioned it to my husband one night. He listened. Then he said, very gently, "How much have you sent them since we moved?" I did the math on a piece of paper. I didn't want to do it in my head because I thought seeing the number written down might make it feel less real. It didn't. In 7 months, I had sent my family $11,000. On top of the monthly $600. $11,000 on top of that. I sat with that number for a while. I didn't cry. I just sat. The next call came 2 weeks later. It was my brother again. He'd found an apartment, a real one, finally, not my parents' basement, and he needed first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. He'd pay me back, he said. He had a job lined up, he said. It was just a matter of timing. He needed $9,000. I heard myself say, I need to think about it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I thought you'd be happy for me. I am happy for you. It doesn't sound like it. I told him I'd called him back. I hung up and went to find my husband, and I told him everything, and he sat across from me at our kitchen table and looked at me with the kind of calm that meant he was being very careful with what he said next. You don't have to do it, he said. I know. Do you, though? That's the thing about being the responsible one in a family. You know you don't have to, technically. But there's a whole other layer of obligation underneath that technicality, and it's made of guilt and love and fear and years of being told that this is just what family does, and it presses down on you in ways that are very hard to explain to someone who didn't grow up inside it. I called my brother back 2 days later. I told him I couldn't do $9,000 right now. I could do $2,000. That was my limit. He said $2,000 wouldn't cover it. I said I knew, and I was sorry, and I hoped he could find another way. He said, You've really changed since you moved. He said it like an accusation. I said, maybe I have, and ended the call. That was October. By November, something had shifted in how my family communicated with me. My mother's texts became shorter. My father didn't return a voicemail I left about Thanksgiving. My brother went completely quiet. We spent Thanksgiving just the two of us. My husband made a whole turkey, which he'd never done before, and it was slightly overcooked and completely wonderful. And we ate at our little table by the big windows and watched it rain over the sound. And I told myself the tightness in my chest was not grief. I believed that for about a week. Then my mother called, and I picked up thinking maybe things had thawed. Maybe she was calling to say she missed me. Maybe this was the moment where we figured out how to be in each other's lives without the money being the whole architecture of it. She said, You need to know that your father and I have talked, and we feel like you've chosen your husband over your family. I said, he's my family. She said, we gave you everything. We sacrificed so you could have opportunities. And the minute things got hard, you left. I had been standing at my kitchen counter. I sat down on the floor. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped working right. I send you money every month, I said. I have sent you money every month for 6 years. That's not what I'm talking about. What are you talking about then? You know what I'm talking about. I didn't know, or maybe I did know, and the knowing was too large to look at directly. We're a family, she said. Families stay together. They don't move across the country the minute a better offer comes along. I took a promotion, Mom. I built a career. You abandoned us. The words sat in the air between us. I didn't respond right away. I think I was waiting for her to take it back. She didn't. I need some time, I said. She said, fine. Take your time. The call ended. I sat on the kitchen floor for a while. My cat came and sat next to me, which she only does when she can tell something is wrong. I scratched behind her ears and stared at the cabinet under the sink and tried to figure out how a person processes the information that the people who were supposed to love them most have been treating that love as something transactional. Something with terms and conditions. Something that expires the moment you stop being useful. My husband came home from a run. He found me on the floor and sat down next to me without asking why, just put his arm around me, and I told him what had happened. He listened. He didn't say I told you so, even though he had told me, years ago. Gently. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know yet. That's okay. It wasn't a clean decision. It never is. There's no single moment where a person decides to step back from their family. There are 100 small moments that build up over time, and at a certain point you look at the accumulation and realize you have been making the same choice over and over without naming it. And all that remains is to say the name out loud. I started with the monthly transfer. I didn't cancel dramatically. I didn't send an announcement. On the 1st of December, I simply did not initiate it. I opened my banking app and looked at the scheduled transfer and I deleted it. It took 4 seconds. My hands were perfectly steady. I waited for the phone to ring. It rang on the 4th of December. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. She said, I just saw the transfer didn't come through. I'm sure it's just a banking thing. Can you check and make sure everything's okay on your end? There it was. 6 years of money, and the story she'd told herself was that it was a banking error. I didn't call back. She called again 2 days later. My brother called the day after that. My father sent a text, just 3 words. Everything okay there? I was sitting at my desk at work when his text came in. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about how many times I had waited for him to ask me that exact question and mean it. Not as a prelude to a request. Not as an opening for a pitch. Just as a question from a father who wanted to know if his daughter was okay. I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to my work. The following week, something arrived in my email that I hadn't expected. My credit monitoring service sent me an alert. A new account had been opened in my name. Not by me. I stared at the notification for long enough that my screen went dark. I unlocked it and read it again. A credit card. A store card from a home goods retailer. Opened in my name using my social security number and my parents' address. My hands were shaking by the time I called the credit card company. I stayed on the phone for 45 minutes. They flagged it. They began a fraud investigation. They were very professional and very efficient, and I appreciated that, because the rest of me was completely coming apart. I already knew who had done it. My brother had mentioned, offhandedly, in a conversation months ago, that he'd found some old documents of mine at my parents' house. Old tax returns. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. I had not thought to think anything of it. I called my husband from the bathroom at work, sitting on the closed lid of the toilet, voice low. He said, Don't call them. Not yet. Call our bank first. Then we call a lawyer, my own family. I said, I know. My brother, I know. He said, I know. But right now we focus on the steps. Can you do that? I could. I had learned somewhere along the way to function through the worst moments. It's a skill I'd developed in that family, ironically. I called our bank. I put fraud alerts on every account. I changed every password. I went through my credit report line by line that evening at our kitchen table with a notepad and a cup of tea that went cold before I touched it. One card. But I reported it to the police. I had to go in person, to the precinct closest to our apartment, and I sat across from an officer who had kind eyes and a bored expression, and I explained, as clearly as I could, that I believed a family member had opened a credit account fraudulently in my name. He took notes. He gave me a case number. I drove home in the rain. I sat in the parking garage for a few minutes before I could make myself go upstairs. My husband had made dinner. The apartment smelled like garlic and something warm, and he took one look at my face and put a glass of water in my hand and said nothing until I was ready to talk. I talked for a long time. He listened for all of it. I sent one final message to my parents. I kept it short. I said I knew about the credit card. I said I had filed a report with the police. I said I would not be pressing charges if the account was closed and the balance cleared within 30 days, but that any further contact from them or my brother that I had not initiated would result in me moving forward with the fraud case fully. I said I would not be resuming the monthly transfer. I said I wished them well, and I meant it, in the hollow way you mean when you have finally stopped expecting them to change. I did not sign it with love. The account was closed within the week. The balance, $412, was paid. I received no response to my message, no explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that any of it had happened. I had not expected one. I think some part of me had stopped expecting anything from them a long time before I admitted it. Spring came to Seattle in a way I hadn't been prepared for. The whole city bloomed at once. Cherry trees, plum trees, rhododendrons in colors I didn't have names for. And my husband and I walked through it on weekends with nowhere to be, and I held his hand and let myself feel the size of the life we had built. I think about my family sometimes. Not constantly, not with the weight I used to carry them. More the way you think about a chapter in a book you've finished. Present in memory, contained, no longer pulling you forward or backward. I don't know if what I did was right. I don't think those are always the kinds of questions that have clean answers. I know I tried. I know I tried for a very long time, in the ways I knew how, and at some point the trying became its own kind of harm. What I know for certain is this. I went to work on a Monday morning in May, and my manager stopped me in the hallway to tell me my project had been greenlit for the next phase, and I walked back to my desk and texted my husband 3 exclamation points and nothing else, and he sent back a voice memo of himself making a crowd-cheering noise with his mouth. And I sat at my desk and laughed so hard I had to cover my face. Nobody had given me that life. I had made it, piece by piece, decision by decision, one hard choice at a time. I had learned, finally, that love is not debt, that family is not a creditor, or a relationship, or a version of yourself built to absorb someone else's needs, is not abandonment. Sometimes it is the only honest thing left to do.